Hey, Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans. Joe Rocky here with Bob, talking about football as fans, breaking down teams around the NFL. Today is the Bucs. And Bob, I'm going to start up. You guys had Brady. You won yourself a Super Bowl. You threw You threw the trophy across the bay. This is the cost of doing business season. And I think that as much as we have been saying Arizona is the runaway going to get the first pick in the draft, and when they have their pick and the Texans, they have the best chance of it by far. But when we're talking about outside looking in, you don't need to squint too hard to see a pathway where a Baker Mayfield-led team gets the first pick overall. And especially given the fact that they don't have a running back, Baker Mayfield only rolls to his right, and he doesn't really throw a very good deep ball anymore. So you just took away the best option of Mike Evans, and Godwin's going to be double blanket cover underneath every time he's on the right side of the field. I see this to be an incredibly predictable offense to cover, put pressure on to roll him to the right. They don't really have a running game. And on defense, I like the fact that they're trying to build up a pass rush. Very good. But if you don't have a lead, the defensive side doesn't ever really matter. Because defenses can't score. They can keep you from scoring.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
Go ahead.
We saw the New York Jets win games last year because
this ain't the Jets defense
was phenomenal. Now, I'm not saying that Tampa Bay
Jets defense was a top 3 defense in the league, Bob.
I'm not saying that the Tampa Bay defense is anywhere close to the Jets defense, but I'm simply stating a point that before you get too far into the road you're traveling there, defense can score, defense can win you championships, but it has to be a really good defense. And when you look on paper for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the only thing that you really are writing home about is the defensive secondary. This is something, again, that is a strength of a perceived strength of Carolina's defense, and it is something that is not a perceived strength for New Orleans defense, but it's definitely, when you look at all,
it's better than Carolina's defense because they have a good secondary and a pass rush. Carolina doesn't have the pass rush.
When you look at Tampa Bay, the best unit of their entire team is their secondary. So it's definitely, there's no questions asked that they're going to have to play elite in every single game. But as we said before in other videos, it's very difficult for a secondary to be elite the whole entire game if there's no pressure being put on the quarterback. Now, Tampa Bay went out there to try to alleviate some of that. They went out there to get pass rushers. They went out there to get run stoppers. So the resources that they poured into this team were poured into an appropriate place because their defense was terrible last year. They tanked. Like when you look at the performance from 2021 to 2022, it had to be one of the worst drop-offs when you look at, not a lot of player turnover, and it just sunk in a crater. Now, back to the point you were making, though, about the offense, is that this offense is not one that I am excited to watch. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are two of our favorite fantasy wide receivers for a very, very, very long time.
Godwin's done a lot of winning for me.
And the situation is sad because, we look at a quarterback in Baker Mayfield and we say there's really good potential for him to succeed. He has weapons, and Baker Mayfield does well sometimes when he does
well with a very good running game. He's a play action quarterback.
That's where I'm getting to, is that when you look at the weapon that's the most important at running back, you're looking at Rachaad White. And we just don't know enough about White as a player because they've been trying to give the ball.
We do. We know that they don't want to give him the ball. They tell it to us.
I'm telling you this, is that last year when we were seeing Leonard Fournette on the field and we were seeing Leonard Fournette struggling on the field, we did see that they didn't want to give the ball to Rachaad White because Tom Brady is even aging Tom Brady felt like a better option to win games than Rachaad White. I mean, Tom Brady passed the ball like 600, 700 times.
Yeah, but that is the answer, Bob.
I get it.
That's the answer.
I get what you're saying, but what I'm simply bringing up is a point to make you think a little bit more about this, is that I would rather put my game in the hands of Tom Brady than put my game in the hands of Rachaad White.
That's fair.
This year, would you rather put your game in the hands of Baker Mayfield, or would you rather put your game in the hands of Rachaad White? And I think that the coaching staff, I'm not saying that Rachaad White is good.
You're basically asking, do I want to have a 2.8-yard run or an incomplete pass?
Yes. Essentially, that's what I'm trying to say, is because Baker Mayfield is so, I mean, if you think of it from, you're looking at, I'm going back to Russell Wilson here for a minute and the bathrooms in his house, because it's got me thinking toilets. When I think of the Buccaneers offense, I'm just thinking toilets. So when I think of Baker Mayfield, he's closer to an outhouse, whereas Tom Brady was closer at points in time in his career to that Japanese toilet in The Simpsons that would talk to you, right? So somewhere in between, there's going to be a decision that's going to be made, is that who is the better option for this team, in Kyle Trask or Baker Mayfield? And at some point in time in this season, I bet you the decision will be made to bench Baker Mayfield, as it often is,
yes.
Put in Kyle Trask, and then lose the rest of your games to go out there and get Caleb Williams with the number 1 overall pick.
Well, here's the problem you could have. What if the Trask goes like 500? You give him the final 6 games, it goes 3-3. Then you're stuck in David Mills territory. Like, we're not sure he's a guy, but he's not imploding either. Like, that's why I would start Trask from the beginning, quite frankly.
I agree with that assessment, and I think we will see as the season goes on, as we will with all these other teams. I mean, their backup running back is Chase Edmonds. Obviously, I'm not sold on him. He was a terrible. I picked him last year in fantasy as well, because I thought that there was never again. But Rachaad White, if we see development in the offseason from him, there's a good chance that this team will find maybe some legs on offense and be able to stand up a little bit and be able to then maybe put up 14 points, so that their defense, if it's gotten better and it's progressed from last year and it got out its, whatever it decided to do last year in tanking, I could see this being one of those teams this year that could win a couple games 16-14, or win a couple games 14-9, because, I'm looking at the schedule, and it's a similar schedule again to all of the schedules that we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. Houston's a very winnable game. We like Indy, but again, depending on Anthony Richardson, that's also a winnable game.
I don't think Richardson's playing this year, Bob. You keep saying that. I think it's going to be Mississippi Mudflaps taking them on borderline to the playoffs.
I think he's playing. And you're looking at where are the wins going to come, and realistically, this team is probably not going to accumulate more than 4 wins.
Well, they're going to be contention for that pick,
and it's most likely not going to compete for a wild card spot. But if it ends up competing for a wild card spot, if you are one of those fans that is hopeful, it all relies on the development of that defense, and it all relies on that secondary just snuffing out every possible option that a quarterback will have.
And that's fair. And I want to give one reason to care about the Bucs in the offseason here when we're in training camp. And it's going to be this: as we prepare for our fantasy shows moving forward, we just went through everything with the Bucs about why their running back room is horrible. And if you were an undrafted running back with any type of good leadership, your team would have recognized you should sign with the Bucs. And there are 2 undrafted running backs on this roster that's worth keeping your eye on. I'm not saying draft them, but watch them through camp on the Bucs, and Ronnie Brown and Sean Tucker. Again, not saying either one of these guys can break a thing, But if they end up making this roster, there's a very clear pathway that you can get an unknown guy in the last round who ends up being, wow, guy won me a league because he ended up being a starter when no one ever gave him a chance. So we'll be breaking down all of our fantasy stuff next week, and take a chance to look at us. And if you haven't already, click subscribe.